So let me start with Ramesh Sippy ji. After having done all of these iconic, amazing films that he mentioned, you moved to television. I know that Doordarshan had already done Hum Log, so they were obviously preparing for these, and there were no other sort of other channels. There was no internet in any case, and so people would only still watch Doordarshan in the 80s, I think, right? How did the conversation start? And was it your Manohar Sham Joshi? He's a writer. It was his idea basically to do the story.
Um, I think at that time it was DD Doordarshan who requested the industry that some people should come forward and do some work for television for DD, and it's the national channel and it needs some experts who know their job, because television was very young at that time. It just started, nascent. So my father was approached, and he, of course, had to try and get me on board. And me, I was reluctant. From the big screen onto the little screen, how do you do it? And how can you tell a story spread over week after week after week?
105 episodes.
I was used to making a film in 2, 3, 4, whatever that period of time we did with films in around 3 hours. So this would be very different for me, very almost impossible. In my heart, I felt I wouldn't be doing it until I met Mr. Manoj Shamjoshi. After meeting him, I started to gain some confidence. Here's a man who's already done some serial.
He did Hum Log also.
That's right. So I could see that he understood the language of television storytelling. That made me a little confident. Then a couple of sittings with him again made me feel that if this guy is with me, then we'll probably be able to do something about it. Then was the question of the subject. When the subject of partition came up, it did both things. It excited me. It also made me frightened. I said, now that's a tall order, because doing something on partition at that time was a bit of a... They were also a little skeptical themselves, but I said, no. All my life, I've been trying to do things differently. So if I have to do something for the little screen, let me do something different. And of course, we had a few sittings and we were able to... The DG at that time also was very encouraging, and together we came around and we were able to formulate this. But honestly, I shot it like a film in 16 mm. It used to be developed, then dubbed, and getting all the secret for me was, if I'm going beyond your question,
No, please.
is I took most of the artists who were Punjabi. So the essence of Punjab was in them already. It may have been some generations down, but it was there. And they all knew about what had happened during the partition. They were from families of... So that helped a lot. Because when you're artists who are actually telling your story, if they are involved in such a way that... And Mr. Joshi with his nuanced writings, with the Punjabi Naina, you know, the lovely little things he did with it.
You were actually sort of pressurized, or you were told to tone it down, especially the rioting scenes, etc.
Later on, as we went into the camps,
right,
they said, "Now listen, take it easy." I had to turn around and tell Manohar Sham Joshi, I think ultimately they want us to convert it into a soap opera. So let's do it with a smile. Let's do it willingly. Keep the heart of everything as it is. And I think it being a sensitive subject, you have to be careful. Film still, it will come, and then it's there for a while, and then it's gone. But this was going on and on and on, and it might create certain problems.
Yeah.
Of course, Tamas had the same problem, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll come to that. Yeah.
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 But it was, I could understand their anxiety and their, so one did water it down a bit and keep to the main stories, and keep the partition feeling on the peripheral side. The families grew, which also happened. A lot of people prospered while after coming here. It's not like all stories were. Yeah.
So, do you think it is because you toned it down that there weren't any protests or you weren't taken to the court?
No, there were no protests, and
Right.
I was never. But they were worried that it might erupt because some news from here and there must have
Right.
crept into them, and they heard things, and maybe a particular episode had a bit of a resonance somewhere, and it provoked a kind of a reaction.
Yeah.
So, but it was not that wide and that. So, but we have managed to keep both the story intact and the anxiety quelled.
Shamba, but I think I should just quickly ask him about Tamas really, because with Tamas you took the source, Bhisham Sani's novel, and Bhisham Sani co-wrote the script with you also. So obviously you were very faithful to the book. But you actually, and during the broadcast of it on Doordarshan, you want to talk about that you were taken to the court and there were some major issues. Were there concerns before? Did Doordarshan look at the script?
No, the major issue happened before the telecast began.
Okay.
Actually, and but in fact, I got the feeling of it even before we even shot a single frame. I was in Delhi, and I was the second unit director and cameraman on Gandhi.
Gandhi, yes.
So during that period, I happened to go to Mandi House.
Mm-hmm.
Some friends were there. I went there and I saw a bookshop on the corner. I just moved towards the bookshop, and then I noticed a lone book on the top shelf. There was nothing else, just one book was there. I read the title and it said Tamas. There was something about the word. I liked it. It's a Sanskrit word. But I liked it. So I said, Dikhao zara. To dekha. And then when I saw the blurb, so I discovered that this was about partition.
Mm-hmm.
And partition is one subject that I wanted to work on ever since I became, a film cameraman to start with. I trained as a cinematographer. I got the book, but didn't start reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Shooting was going on. After a week or so, I got the time in the evening. We came back home early, and I started reading it. The very first sentence of the book, or the first paragraph, I remember because it just happened to me. It said, दीवार में बने आले में what you call it, एक दिया था और दिया ने एक झपकी ली. I said, अच्छा, very first sentence में action आ गया. So, and then I read the sentence and the paragraph. I couldn't stop reading after that. It was very gripping, and something about the book was that I now can see, which attracted me to it, was it was suffused with compassion. The book was written in 74.
Right.
The partition happened in 47. So apparently the writer had enough time to reflect upon it. It was not a knee-jerk reaction to an event. And then I felt one or two other very strong qualities of that narrative. One was there was no effort to pass judgment on any particular community or any particular party or something like that. No, he just described what he had seen.
Right.
And whatever is in the book has been witnessed by him or he heard about them. Because later on, few years ago before he died, he published a small book in which all his experiences of partition were recorded. And I was surprised that every single incident that happens in the book had actually happened to him in life. So it had a sense of authenticity. So a combination of compassion and being non-judgmental about things is something that attracted me. And that seeped into the way he created characters. His language is very simple. Bhisham Sahni, if anybody has read the books, if not, then I suggest you read them. It's such a simple writer, but his writing touches you very, very deeply. So this is, I took it as a, गाने वाले के पीछे तानपुरा होता है ना, तो वो एक सुर लग गया मुझे.
But
and that's how I started.
Yeah. But did you, before you started the shoot, and when I'm sure you had to present the script to Doordarshan, did you?
During that period, something very interesting happened during the shooting of Gandhi. During that period, there was a meeting arranged with Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And the meeting was arranged by the ministry, where all the directors of Hindi, of the Indian films were invited to meet the Prime Minister. I was also invited because my the very first film, Akrosh, was in the competition.
Right.
And we were told the Prime Minister will come. Every one of you will get 2 minutes to go and speak to her. And be careful, don't speak too long. I said, okay. So, and लोग बात कर रहे थे. I had no idea what I'm going to speak to her about. करते करते मेरा turn आ गया. जाओ 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 बात करो. So I went. I had nothing else, but before that I had read the book in that thing. So I just said, Madam, if there is a serious work on partition, serious work, will the government support it? So she said, what do you mean by support it? I said, money. Because I said, for a film like this, I don't expect the industry to support it, but I'll need some extra support. She said, after that, the important thing, she said, when do you want to make it? So I said, whenever the money is available, funds are available to me. So she said, it will all depend upon the political situation in the country when you make the film. I suddenly, I had no idea. I knew it was a very good book and it was a very touching book, but I never realized that it has the potential to create political ripples. I said, thank you, ma'am.
And by the time the film was made, I'm sorry, but 88, she had passed away already.
Yeah. But that's when I realized that Tamas has to be, touched very seriously and sensitively because it has the kind of implications that I never had in mind. And during the same period, the director of Doordarshan at that time, Mr. I.S. Gill, he met me at a party. We met rather. So I said, Gill साहब आप तो बोलते हैं कि Doordarshan will accept anything. I have this novel on partition, but it's a serious novel. Do you think Doordarshan will accept it? He said, why not? Send me the proposal. I sent him the proposal. For 6 months, no answer. Again, we made another party. And I reminded him of saying, he said, नहीं आया कुछ? मैंने कहा नहीं. मैंने कहा अच्छा अच्छा मैं देखता हूँ. Within 1 month, I got the okay. And then there were no funds. Another 6 months went, and ultimately, the Blaze films, who had produced all Mr. Benegal's films,
yes, yes.
and because of that, I knew the Lalit Bijlani and others. So we met by chance.
Right.
And he said, "Why are you looking so glum today?" I said, "Because I have this proposal waiting for me, and I have no funds." He said, "Will you make it for me?" I said, "Yes, but it can be a very controversial film. So you be prepared for that. Will you give me a feature film at the end of it?" I said, "Yes, but I will not make it as a serial. I'll make it a mini series." He said, "Okay, give me 15 days, I'll get back to you." On the 12th day, he said, "We are ready, start." And it just happened. I sat with my assistant for 1 month and wrote the script.
You still, I think when the film was being broadcast, I read not the film, the television show. In the middle of it, somebody went to the court and tried to stop it.
No.
No?
Not in the middle of it.
Right. Before.
What happened was that the film got ready. Then I had a preview. And in that preview, one of the gentlemen saw the film, and then he wrote about it, saying that it's a very biased view, and it's biased against the Hindus.
You know, journalists are like that, by the way.
Yeah. And then that became a big issue, of course.
He was also threatened.
Yeah.
While it was going on.
Yes.
I remember, he was in his home and he had a bunch of people outside his home threatening to set it on fire. His home.
No.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I remember that time.
To be true to what happened was, the court order was challenged immediately, and the film was shown to the judges. I remember Justice Sujata Manohar and Justice Lentin in Blaze preview theatre in Kolaba on Sunday. They sat for 4.5 hours continuously.
Watch the whole thing.
And they watched the whole thing. And they had the argument in the theatre itself. Then they said, tomorrow we will have the judgment. Tomorrow was the day when the Doordarshan had decided to start the telecast.
So it was the same day.
It
right.
has to be the same day. The telecast was to start at 10 o'clock in the evening. And next day, they announced that the film will be shown.
And
Everybody was happy from our side, of course. And then somebody came in to say that there's a call from my house. And I was told that time there were no
cell phones.
I mean, there were no these smartphones
Yeah.
around. And they said, please don't come back because there are people outside the house. And said, okay. I sent my rest of the staff who were with me, and I landed up at Shyam's place.
That's a safe place to go when these kind of things happen.
So I spent the night there, and then onwards, I had the police protection all the time for 8 weeks.
Wow. Yeah. So we'll talk more about. So Shamba, we watched Momo last night, and it's really one of my all-time favorite films. It's so adorably charming, and there's so much humor. Actually, today I'd forgotten Bunyad. There's so much humor in Bunyad also. But and I remember confirming with Khalid Mohammed that he actually wore a burqa with his friend to go see Psycho. So, we witnessed that right in the beginning of the film. How did that come about? So, and also I would like to know is how much of did Khalid, did he actually fictionalize any bit, or is actually pure narrative of his aunt and his grand aunt and his grandmother?
Well, as far as I know, it's the story of his great aunt.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, when before I actually thought in terms of making it as a film, Khalid, in fact, had written a story.
Okay.
Written it as a little piece for Times of India.
Mm.
And after that, you see, a very strange event took place. This was about his great aunt who had come, from Pakistan and had trouble staying, and it was very difficult for her to stay beyond a certain
visa,
beyond the point of visa, and he was having that kind of a problem. Now, I was planning to do the film. I had worked out a script. This part wasn't there because it hadn't happened. In my story, there wasn't originally the part that the police come and take her back. That wasn't part of it because it hadn't happened.
Okay.
But it happened when after I had written the script, and then she was in fact tough back.
Okay. Yeah.
Into setback.
Right.
And then my story remained unfinished in many ways.
Right.
And then it so happened that the old lady came back.
Which happens at the end of the film.
Which happens at the end of the film.
Right.
So once she came back, then I had my story for the film.
But you made the film in '94. I'm trying to get and when I'm watching it, of course, they go see Garam Hawa.
Yeah.
The Bobby's songs playing. So obviously you said it in like '83, or except before that, Garam Hawa was in the '70s.
Yeah.
When Mammo's still not alive, I would imagine, Ravi.
No. You see, Mammo had come, and then she had gone back.
Right.
Now, the fact was that she was trying to come back again. The story was that she couldn't come back again.
Right.
But she does come back again.
Right.
And it happened at that time. What had happened was that Mammo had got, she got married to someone.
Who moved to Pakistan.
Moved to Pakistan. And then when that gentleman died, his family, kind of threw her out of the house. And she had no place to go.
Right.
So she was staying in mosques and various other places. Finally, she found a way of getting back. And that's when she came back to return to her sister's place. That is Khalid's grandmother's place. And after that, that's the main part of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
I know in connection with this whole weekend that we've been here, really, I mean, the dialogue when she says, I was born in Panipat.
Yeah.
This is my home. And I think in your film also you have characters talking about that.
Yeah.
The countries kept changing or something. I think it's really, remarkable, beautiful. By the way, I don't know if you guys many of you saw Mammo, but have you guys seen Zubeda? I'm sure you've seen Zubeda. I was so thrilled because Mammo makes an appearance in Zubeda also.
Yeah. Because it's part of the same family.
Right. It's the same story. Really.
Yeah.
I thought it was absolutely. I'm trying to get a sense from both Ramesh Sippy and Govind Nihalani, but political issues, any protests, were there any related to Mammo?
Not really.
Making a story about Pakistan?
No, nothing as dramatic as what happened to Govind.
Yeah.
Nothing of that kind.
Yeah.
There really was no problem as far as the film was concerned.
Right.
Because it was made actually for the National Film Development Corporation. It was made for NFDC. So, in fact, the government was a participant in the making of the film in that sense. So, I don't think we had any problems there as far as Mammo was concerned.
Yeah, no, it's a lovely film.
Neither did we.
Well, also, you had
Neither did we.
You had the protection of the government also through Darshan.
But as a matter of fact, traffic stopped on both sides of the border when Bunyad was on.
Yeah,
That was
work of yours.
So there was nothing objectionable, but they were glued. They were enjoying it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the Bunyad changed the way actually how Indians started watching television. It's very, very remarkable as a milestone in that way. Yeah. So we just saw your documentary, which I thought was fascinating, and you made a very relevant point, which I'm sure Parmesh and all have noted that's probably the only piece of work that we've discussed over this weekend where the partition of the other side of the partition of Bengal was discussed really. But I thought it was really fascinating. So you traveled with families from now Bangladesh coming looking for their homes in West Bengal and elsewhere also. You went with Indians going to Bangladesh also, and you also went to some of the camps. You said in are people still living in camps in Madhya Pradesh area, or they just been settled there?
Some people are still living. There had been a huge lot of programs to resettle them, and a lot of people have been moved out to the camps, to
Right.
the government programs. But still, quite a substantial number of people are staying there, and they who chose deliberately stay back. Another, they call it what you heard, that permanent liabilities. And they have nowhere to go, especially women who had no husband or son to take care of. So there are some few male also. So they are the permanent residents of those camps. Yes, those camps exist even today.
By the way, I'm from Delhi, grew up there, but I don't know if you know, but there's a Chitranjan Park, which is a very well-known South Delhi colony, was once upon a time called EPDP colony, East Bengal Displaced Persons Colony. So original inhabitants of that came from all the way from East Bengal all the way up to Delhi also, really.
I think the people living in Chittaranjan Avenue, I've been there, they're the ones who might be little privileged. They're from the upper echelon of the society.
Now,
Now, yeah. At the
Yes.
initial, everybody had to struggle. But those people are most unfortunate ones who still living in the railway tracks on the besides in West Bengal, and you can find right from the border
Right.
to Shialda, Calcutta. It's numbers can be millions who never could make it after partition.
yeah, Delhi also has colonies of refugees who came from West Pakistan, Karol Bagh, the Patel Nagar. These are all areas that were occupied by refugees who came from there. Is this you've done some other work also related to partition? Have you done another documentary also?
Actually, I've done in that way maybe 1.5 film on partition. One is a fiction called Chitra Nodir
Okay.
Pare, the Hindu family who refused to migrate from East Pakistan and what happened to them, especially after the 1964 riot. There was a big riot took place there in 1964. The Kashmir Hazrat Bal issue, if you remember that.
Yeah.
So that is one fiction film, but surprisingly, it's a very popular film. People love to watch it. And then it's a documentary called Promised Land, Shapno Bhumi, about the Bihari Muslims who had migrated from Bihar. But the first part of the film only deal with partition of 47. That's why I said half. The rest half deals with the 1971, what happened to them.
So how are these works been received in Bangladesh, given also the political climate in Bangladesh, how it's becoming more and more sort of extremist? A film like this that we saw today, I wish it good luck. I wish you really good luck. But are you concerned at all?
Like any other society, Bangladesh society is also divided. So there are progressive people, there are democratic people, liberal people, and there are people who may have other kind of ideas. But you have to understand that, of course, a lot of bad news always get preference, by the media and get sensationalized. But the democratic force in Bangladesh is not very weak either. Otherwise, we couldn't exist and work there. So no, I'm not much concerned. No. There will be some opposition, sure, but there are also people who support us.
Would Doordarshan allow you to make another Bunyad? You said it was shown in 2013, although the government was different at that time. Can we make films like that in India anymore? I mean, even Tamas and a story about Mamu also about a Pakistani Muslim who comes back to India.
I don't think it should be a problem. Why do we always feel frightened that they will?
I don't know. I'm not a filmmaker, so I.
There will always be a faction of
Right.
people who will oppose. But that's their at any point in time, anywhere in the world. It's there in America. Trump says something, and there's a huge thing about it. But doesn't mean that meaningful films or films against Trump will not be made. They will be made.
Yeah, then you're right. Garam Hava ran into trouble in 73, 74.
When it was made,
When it
yes.
was made, yes.
But you see, one of the things is that there's also, you have to look at these films in terms of the time from 1947 onwards, because it's now 70 years. The generation, I mean, the several generations have passed, and the number of people who will remember it as a living experience would be very few. Another 10 years, 15 years, they would all be dead. So it will really be part of everybody's historical past. You know? Yeah, of course. But it's no longer going to be a living experience. So as long as it was a living experience, because it's the most traumatic thing that happened in South Asia, the most traumatic. You know, despite all the diversities that South Asia represents, you know, probably the most remarkable amount of diversity, it was always contained. You know, it was always contained, whether with empires, with everybody. It was culturally contained, although we had the largest number of religions in the world. All this was constantly contained. One time when the whole thing came apart was because of partition. And that's why that was probably the most traumatic thing that happened in South Asia. You know, because, and then of course for India, in terms of India itself, I think Pakistan splitting into Bangladesh and Pakistan probably seemed to some extent as a kind of redemption. As far as India is concerned.
Right.
You know, in Indian terms, you saw it as a redemption. You saw that, in fact, the idea of this diversity being contained because of the kind of value systems we had over a very long period of time, there was a kind of reaffirmation of all of that. But until that time, it was just terrible. You know, because nobody could really accept the fact. Like, say, for instance, I don't believe that most Indians could accept the fact that it was divided and there is Pakistan. So you couldn't see it with a kind of kindly eye, with a sympathetic view, you know. That would really be a bit of a fake in many ways. But all that changed, dramatically afterwards, of course.
I think the intent of the maker,
That's true.
if it's honest, if it's right, if it's well placed, and if it's well told, will always be taken in that spirit. You may have to fight a bit because there will be people who will oppose it. But I think the intent will show. And if your intention is just to show happenings and the pain of things, it's not to bring the divide, then I think you will be able to.
Then why is it that these stories are not told that often anymore? I mean, look at the interest we have today. I mean, I know because there are 4 amazing filmmakers here also. But why is it that such stories are not being told? Like, is it the funding issues? Hopefully there is audience. Even the smaller indie films get released everywhere.
I don't think
you can also step in really. But Tamas also, yeah.
But it doesn't have the same currency that it had. That's what I'm saying. Generations change. It's no longer part of people's living experience, as it was. Certainly if you think of when Tamas was made, Mammo I can't really include in the same sort of thing, but it relates to partition, it relates to families,
impact of partition,
impact of in terms of families being divided, etc. But the fact is, like Bunyad, and those were really about partition. they dealt with partition. Now, remember when that happened, when those films were made, they were all made a little before the 50th anniversary.
Right. Including your film, Mama was 94.
Yeah, even that was, so it was much earlier.
Yeah.
Now, now it's become really part of history and part of lore.
Is it
as
history
it
that we are
were.
forgetting? I mean,
Not necessarily. I don't think you're forgetting that history, but it is no longer part of large number of people's living experience.
mhm,
It's not their living experience.
mhm.
It may have been their parents' generation
I get it.
living experience, that sort of thing. Yes.
Yeah. Um, what kind of a lesson? What do you want people to take away? Because we only saw an hour and a half of Tamas, but the younger generation. And Tamas is, by the way, it's available on DVDs. I know because I have a set. It's also available on YouTube. The quality may not be that good, but I would recommend it. Everybody should watch it, especially the younger generation. But what can they learn from that? What can they? I mean, apart from the amazing performances and it's very very gripping saga and great actors and.
See, one of the things that becomes obvious once you read Thomas, the book, is that, as I said earlier, there's no effort to uh, to pass judgment on who was right, who was wrong. The thing that emerges is that whenever anybody tries to manipulate the religious sentiments of the communities for the objective which has nothing to do with religion. Objective is always something else. It could be political, for example. But you always manipulate the religious sentiments to achieve something else. And when that happens, the history shows that a great tragedy occurs. And who suffers is the poor and the people who don't really have either the understanding or the energy to fight effort like that. So the important thing that emerges from the book is that let this not happen again. If you read the book, the whole thing is remember it. This is what happened to us. But let us do something that it is not repeated. That is one of the things. And the other thing is, as a filmmaker, the question is, do I want to make another film on partition? Why? If I say yes, I should have a good reason. Either there should be a brilliant written work or something, memoir appears and I find something this is now has a universal significance.
Can I just stop you? The Germans keep making films again and again about the Nazis, and they're making better and better films about the Nazis.
Yes.
That era.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But the important thing is, as a filmmaker, having made film like Thomas, I also went through some kind of a purge. And now I would say, if I make a film today, I would rather make a film where I will try to say that the hate should disappear. We should do something where we get the peace. We make films about the peace. I will make an anti-hate film. I will make anti-violence film. For that, I don't need partition. So that also is one factor that you should take into account, because people can't live with hate and memories of violence and memories of such pain all the time. You want to move on. You have to think of the generations, our children, our younger generation, not to grow up with that feeling of hate all the time.
That is why when you mention Jews and there's always, that is why a film like Life is Beautiful showed another aspect
Yeah, that's-
altogether,
yeah.
and it was brilliant.
Yeah, but so many, in fact, when Spielberg makes Schindler's List, I mean, there's so many elements to that whole story about what happened during the Second World War. Really. I wanted to ask you, Tanvir Saab, Bangladesh went through, the turmoil of the partition itself was tremendous, but I think the turmoil and the pain of the creation of Bangladesh itself in 1971, that's even more, and there are political ramifications. There have been all these trials that have been going on. Um, you think the partition is still equally important, or the 1971, the tragedy that happened before the creation of Bangladesh,
It's
really?
good that you came up with the question because I thought about this film, The Borderline. I originally thought of title is 1947, but there are other titles of the same name in the film. So I titled this. When I made a film called 1971, for that I worked on 7 years. So that's a huge film, 3.5 hours. So while working on that, I found or I discovered that the 1947 is the core issue. And if we don't deal with that, so the story will be untold of our people. So 1971 brought me to 1947. So there's a very organic link between all these divisions, for at least from the East Bengal perspective. Yes, sure, there's a huge link.
Yeah, but I was also asking you about the society in Bangladesh. I mean, the creation of 1970 and the killings that happened before that.
Yeah, it was a huge trauma, and as can be as bad as things happened in Punjab, because these are real genocide. I mean, very planned genocide. When an army of a state decides that they will just eliminate one section of people, that can be terrible. That we experienced in German things and Nazi things. So our people went through that, and the whole thing happened in biblical proportions. I mean, never ever in history 10 million people migrated from one to become refugee, which happened, and 3 million people were killed. More than 200,000 women were raped. The number can be much more. So these are really, really terrible for such a small piece of land. So I think our people have not come out with the trauma yet. And the trials and other things are happening. These are just logical uh, things that is happening. We have to come in terms with the past and get rid of this legacy, and as a nation, as a people, move on. So we have to deal with 1947, 71, and that for matter also 1947. As I said, that's the core of everything.
So my question is to Mr. Neelani and then to everyone else. It's about the moment you described when you realized that your work could have political ramifications and could create a ripple when you were talking to Indira Gandhi. So as an artist, when you realize that you have such concentrated power in your hands, like that moment of realization, how does that change the way you work after that? Like, is there a distinct shift, or do you try to ignore that power that's in your hands?
It is, if you are a sensitive person, sensitive to what's happening to the society, in the society, politics is something you can't avoid. You have to be aware of it. Then it is your choice whether you want to treat a particular subject, particular story, and make the political element in it more prominent, or you want to keep that as a background, not ignore it. Keep that as a background and take the humanistic elements and give them as a background. So what happens is you are telling a human story against the background of a political environment. Right now, I'm in a position where I cannot make a film only on political issues. The human element has to dominate in the work that I want to make now. It may change tomorrow, I don't know. But the fact is, as you practice the medium, at least I have come to the conclusion that the politics has significance in my life only if I also connect with the human element of the narrative.
So, I
Thank
have
you.
this question, Ramesh, if you can answer also. Even at the point when you decided, you said to make it into a soap opera, it was a big saga you were telling about a family, their lives, and then the partition and the journey to India, and and then settling down in a new land as such. How did you? I mean, there's a tremendous responsibility to tell the story, really.
No doubt. That is why you have to behave responsibly too. As he said also, uh, the fact that you have the power to present these things does not mean you allow that power to go to your head and say anything you like. As long as you are balanced about your approach and you're making the point you intend to make, that's good enough. Because it is, if something is sensitive, we know our country, it'll flare up here, there, and everywhere. It's not worth it. That is not worth it. But that should not be the reason why you do not tell stories. You must have the courage to tell the story that you feel you have to tell. I'm sure there will always be such people. They will come forward. They will make those films they have in the past and they will in the future. Don't ever stop. Youngsters, don't ever stop.
I want to address that the question that young lady asked. I don't believe that you have a great sense of power when you're doing something. If you did, then I think you'd make an awful mess of things. Because you would think that you're very important, and and that is a real no. If you're going to be working, I don't think you have to you become self-conscious in that fashion, because you're conscious of yourself, but being self-conscious, because this would mean being self-conscious, thinking, "Oh, I'm a very powerful guy, I've got this powerful weapon in my hand." This is absolutely a no.
Okay, that's a lesson to learn for everybody who wants to write films or make films, or I think any path you chose. Yeah.
I didn't see in all our partition stories, and we have Sindhis also making the movies and or reflecting the Sindhi story. I'm wondering if there is a reason for it, and I'm wondering if it's possible now to share the Sindhi story, because apart from the violence, there's also the loss of land and culture and the material wealth, but the material culture, the literature, which we are rich in and which can be shared as part of our. And I'm wondering if that's a possibility, and I'm wondering if there's a reason for. It's also a question of also our identity and our self-worth.
But those are perennial things, aren't they? I mean, I don't think, you see, because you can make human stories, and there will always be room for human stories. But when you talk about partition, we are also talking about the politics, the whole political situation of that time, or maybe because the reasons why partition took place. Yeah, those are political things in the sense that you see, I mean, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, I mean, you look at South Asia, generally, it's a place of immense diversity. And not only diversity, it has got the largest number of religions in the world. It has also the largest number of ethnic groups
And languages.
and languages. So you have so many areas that can become areas of dispute. That can, there are fault lines galore all over the place. But if you look at it from the positive side, you will see that it's amazing that with all these fault lines, how we have kept together. Because if you look at any other part of the world, I mean, if you look at Europe, what happened to Europe? Europe, when, after the Holy Roman Empire, all of Europe split up into so many different nations. And that job is not yet complete. Because if you saw that little area of Yugoslavia, what happened there? I mean, towards the end of last century, I mean, it's amazing. Because, that work of splitting has not completed itself in Europe. But as far as we are concerned, I personally am very optimistic because we have managed to contain a much greater diversity, much greater diversity. And we don't have the kind of animosity one would have expected would remain. Like, I don't see that animosity between Pakistan and ourselves, except when it comes to certain kinds of situations, certain political reasons for one or another kind of dispute. But it does not automatically assume the proportion that the moment something that happens, the minorities in our country are going to be at risk. That doesn't happen anymore. So this is what I think is the remarkable quality that we have of being able to contain the diversities.
Hi. So, I mean, don't you think, I mean, the contemporary cinema that deals with the serious issues, like partition or war, they lack that appeal to reach out to the, mass or, I mean, huge audience? Because just a recent example, 3 days back, I watched that film Ragdesh, recent film about that, three soldiers. Now, the original story is so, mesmerizing that when, communal riots were taking place and between Hindu, Muslims and Sikhs, at the same time, the trial, three soldiers, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, they were under the trial by the British for waging war against the Britishers and siding with the Subhash Chandra Bose. And that trial, as an effect of the trial, the whole country united. So it was such an emotional. But when you watch the movie, it's so bloody boring. You know, it's like a 3 hours of history lecture. This happened, that happened, that happened, and after a time, I mean, because I'm from the film industry, so I could bear it. The whole audience was out before the interval.
No, but that
So-
film failed. I mean,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
intent,
no,
I haven't
so-
seen it. The intent might have been good. Have you seen Shyam Babu's
Yeah. No,
Bose?
sir, I'm talking about the contemporary cinema.
Yeah.
I mean,
But Bose is fairly contemporary also. How?
no, contemporary as in, I mean, the films that have been made,
Yeah, okay,
I mean,
yeah.
the commercial, because NFDC is not supporting those serious content as it used to be, 20 years back. So the commercial mainstream cinema will deal with the serious issues like partition, and they lack that kind of appeal, to reach out to the wider mass.
I haven't seen the film,
Okay.
but I would put that down to the maker. I think he would have to take that. What you said against the film is his doing, right? Because it didn't interest you, it didn't hold you. That means it was not a good film. So it's as simple as that.
No, I've read
But
that
there
people
are many films.
people are disappointed because Manshu Dhulia has made far stronger films. So it's an odd case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a man who's
He made
made.
Pansing Tomar. Yeah.
Huh? So, in somewhere in this, either he wasn't convinced about what he was
This,
telling, or
doesn't have to do anything with what you're saying, but as something, the kind of footnote. You see, when the INA trials took place, they took place late 1945, early 46, right? And there was Shahnawaz, Sehgal, and Dillon. Now, 1947, when partition took place, Shahnawaz was on the other side. Within a month after that, after independence, as you know, problems in Kashmir began when raiders came in. And the funny part of it was that Shahnawaz was one of the people who was supporting the raiders from the other side. It's amazing. It's a very strange kind of thing that happened. Because when we saw, this is where the complexity comes in, because when we talk about the INA trials, we talk about them being one Hindu, one Muslim, and one Sardaji, three people representing the spectrum of what was the Indian army at that time, the three communities. And then when Bhulabhai Desai went and and fought for them and so on. And of course, they were convicted and then released. But the odd part of it is that nobody realizes that in 47, after that, you had Shahnawaz on the other side actually supporting the raiders fighting in Kashmir. So it's a very complex, it's not an easy thing to look at, because, when I was making my Bose film, it's very interesting because I had Shahnawaz, I had Dilno, I had Saigal, I had these three characters in my film. Now, a nephew of Shahnawaz wrote to me from Rawalpindi, not from Rawalpindi, from Peshawar, saying that he would like to play his uncle.
Wow.
In the film. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it. It wasn't so easy because, there were visa issues, all sorts of things to bring him to India and so on. But strangely enough, he looked very close to the way his uncle did, in looks.
Wow. That's an interesting story.
See, the freedom of expression is being stifled. I mean, in our country, and I would also like an experience in Bangladesh. I mean, it's the whole fight, and especially in cinema, the experience of lipstick under burqa, how the censor board is functioning. I would like your comments on your experience. You have been in cinema making censor board then, now, relevance, and even in Bangladesh.
But the censor board.
Regarding India, I don't know much, so I will
Not
only
related to this
concentrate
panel,
on.
though.
But I said freedom of expression
Yeah,
in
yeah.
making films,
Okay.
whether it's political. The protests, even what the Tamas went through,
Okay.
went through that way. I mean,
So I will only concentrate on Bangladesh because that I know, and also my own experience. Different times, 3 of my films were banned. One was called Sriti Ekat, the Remembrance of 71. It was about the Bengali intellectuals who were murdered by Islamic fundamentalists. They had a killing squad called Al Badr. People were picked up from home, blindfolded and shot. And some of them were our best writers and artists. And often the dead bodies were never found. So that film we made long back, but it was never released. And then another film, River named Madhumati, Norinna Madhumati, it's on the Liberation War. That film was banned, but we went to High Court and the film was eventually released. Then another documentary called Kornofuli Kanna, Teardrops of Kornofuli. It is about the Chittagong hill tracts, where we have some ethnic problems and these Pahari and Bengali and some human rights violation by our army. So that film was also banned. Again, we went to High Court and got it released. So censor is a botheration, continuous botheration, but that won't deter us doing self-censor. But by now we know also how to handle it. But it's a concern. It's something, and the less whenever. But we have changes when we have a relatively better democratic government, censor is more relaxed. When you have a relatively not so democratic government, we have censor board become very strict. So that is a problem.
We have given a report to the government on creating new guidelines for the Central Board of Film Certification. Now that terminology is not censors, because there's not a single no use of scissors.
Yes.
So it's a question of classifying films
Yes.
for their, in terms of age and maturity of the likely audience, as an advisory rather than saying that you cut a film. Because recently there was a film there were 40 cuts or something in it, I was told, and the press and television, knowing that I had something to do with the report that we have given to the government.
Call you for comments.
I was constantly, I was being pestered night and day the last week, so it's one of those things.
Actually, I want to go back to what Sharmeen said yesterday, and she really said, Sharmeen Obaid Chennai, the celebrated 2-time Oscar-winning filmmaker from Pakistan. And, we've been spending the past 3 days essentially in talking about how we really need to acknowledge how everyone has been both good and bad, and we really need to move ahead with our realities. The reality is that I'm just sharing, again, something Sharmeen and me have been talking about. We are three amazing countries with three very young populations. We have an Earth which is going through global warming. So the more we fight, the less, we're going to kill we won't kill ourselves, the Earth will kill ourselves. We have water disputes. We have young populations with all need jobs. And we have the threat of terrorist activities across our regions. So the way we can collaborate is by building bridges instead of walls. So I think for a lot of us progressives, Sharmeen, me, there are so many people who are building bridges through peace and friendship initiatives. A better framework of looking at it is how do we build bridges? So, and that might be a more useful framework saying 70 years later, we're all connected by our land and by a common history. Now, how do we build bridges between our young populations as we move ahead towards a common future? So I just want to that framework is very important.
The prevailing mentality around partition, especially in India, is still one that has this very happy-go-lucky frame of, oh, during partition, there are these great stories of people who are united, or there are stories about, oh my God, brutal partition of the subcontinent. We don't really see much of a perspective about why partition happened and those who think that partition was justified. And I want to say that in theater, we've had a lot more success. There have been plays that have been put forth. I don't agree with all of them, like me Nathuram Godse bolto hai, but we've never seen a me Muhammad Ali Jinnah bolto hai in this country yet. So when will we start seeing cinema that nuances that idea of partition? Because I think the Radcliffe line and partition defines those of us who are born after, but we know such little about it.
Young man, we look to you.
I look forward to your police protection.
Why don't you make it? You, the young one, go on.